Right now, the January 2026 winter storm Fern is officially over, but the crisis in the United States is not. As of February 3rd, at least 153 people have died across 24 states. That death toll makes Winter Storm Fern the deadliest winter storm in North America, since Winter Storm Uri killed 290 people during the 2021 Texas power crisis. Nearly 300,000 customers remain without electricity in Tennessee, Mississippi, and surrounding states. Some have been in the dark for more than 10 days. Utility crews warn that full restoration could still be days away in the hardest-hit rural areas. The geographic reach of this disaster is staggering. From the frozen ponds of North Texas, where 3 young brothers fell through ice and drowned, out to the streets of New York City, where 16 people died from hypothermia, Winter Storm Fern carved a path of destruction across 2,000 miles of American terrain. Tennessee has confirmed 25 deaths. Mississippi reported 23. New York City alone has lost 16 lives, 13 of them directly attributed to hypothermia as temperatures plunged into record-breaking territory. And the storm season is not finished. Right now, meteorologists are tracking another developing winter system that could bring heavy snow and dangerous ice back to the East Coast within 48 hours. Millions of people who just survived Fern are now preparing to face round 2. Here is the important part. This is not just a weather story. This is a story about infrastructure pushed to the breaking point, about blood supplies dropping so low that hospitals had to cancel non-emergency surgeries, and about emergency shelters that are still packed tonight with families who have nowhere else to go. 153 lives lost, 850,000 customers without power at the storm's peak, and a nation asking a single question: what happens when the next storm hits? In the maps and satellite loops, Winter Storm Fern began as 2 seemingly separate weather systems that would merge into one historic disaster. Around January 21st, a powerful low-pressure system formed over the Pacific Ocean, then crossed the Rocky Mountains, drawing moisture from both the Gulf of Mexico and the Pacific. At the same time, a massive Arctic air mass broke free from the polar vortex and plunged southward across Canada and into the Central Plains. When those 2 systems collided on January 23rd, the result was catastrophic. Meteorologists watched as the storm exploded in intensity, dropping barometric pressure so rapidly it qualified as a bomb cyclone. The storm's path was brutal in its efficiency. It started in the southern plains on Thursday, January 23rd, dumping ice across Texas and Oklahoma. By Friday the 24th, it had pushed into the Tennessee Valley with freezing rain that coated power lines in inches of ice. Saturday the 25th brought the heaviest snow to the mid-Atlantic and Northeast. Cities that usually handle winter weather with ease were paralyzed. New York City recorded 11.4 inches in Central Park. The Bronx saw 13.5 inches, the highest total in the city. North Carolina, a state where snow is rare and infrastructure is unprepared, received more than 22 inches in some mountain communities. According to the National Weather Service, 230 million people were under some form of winter weather alert during the peak of the storm. That is nearly 70% of the entire United States population. Warnings stretched from the Mexican border all the way to the Canadian line, covering an area larger than Western Europe. By Saturday evening, the power grid began to collapse. Ice-covered trees snapped under the weight and fell onto power lines. Transformers exploded in cascades of sparks. At the peak of the outages, more than 850,000 customers were sitting in the dark. Utility companies described the damage as some of the worst they had seen in decades. In Tennessee alone, more than 90,000 homes and businesses lost electricity, and thousands of those customers are still waiting for restoration as of tonight. The aviation industry ground to a halt. Airlines canceled more than 10,000 flights nationwide between January 24th and January 27th. According to industry analysts, it was the worst single day of flight cancellations since the COVID-19 pandemic. Will Rogers International Airport in Oklahoma City canceled every single flight on Saturday and every Sunday morning departure. Hartsfield-Jackson, Atlanta International Airport, the busiest in the world, became a ghost town. Passengers slept on terminal floors, uncertain when they would get home. 19 states recorded at least 12 inches of snow. The highest total came from Bonito Falls, New Mexico, where 31 inches piled up in less than 48 hours. But it was not just the snow. Wind gusts reached 71 miles per hour in some locations, creating whiteout conditions and wind chills that plunged well below zero. In Florida, a state that almost never sees freezing temperatures, multiple cities broke cold weather records. Daytona Beach hit 23 degrees Fahrenheit. Snow flurries were reported in Tampa. It was a meteorological anomaly that left even veteran forecasters stunned. By the time the storm finally weakened on January 27th, at least 153 people had lost their lives. The causes of death ranged from hypothermia in vehicle accidents on icy roads to carbon monoxide poisoning from improper use of generators. In Bonham, Texas, 3 brothers aged 6, 8, and 9 fell through the ice on a private pond and drowned. In New York City, most of the 16 victims were found outside, exposed to temperatures that rarely dip so low in an urban environment with so many resources nearby. When Winter Storm Fern hit its peak, the American Red Cross launched what it described as a massive response across multiple states, stretching from Texas to New England. Thousands of volunteers were deployed. Emergency shelters opened in school gymnasiums, community centers, and churches. On the coldest night of the storm, January 26th, tens of thousands of people sought refuge in these shelters, many of them families who had been without heat for days. Walk into one of the emergency shelters still open tonight. Gym floors are lined with cots and folded blankets. Children play quietly with donated toys while their parents huddle around extension cords trying to charge phones, desperate to reach relatives, check work emails, or simply find out when the power might come back on. Volunteers serve hot meals from portable kitchens. The air smells like instant coffee and industrial disinfectant. People wait in long lines for showers. And everywhere, there is a quiet tension. They are waiting for 2 things that still have not fully returned: heat and certainty. The blood supply crisis added another layer of urgency. According to the American Red Cross, more than 500 blood donation events were canceled due to the storm. That resulted in approximately 15,000 units of blood that were never collected. Hospitals across the affected region began rationing supplies. Non-emergency surgeries were postponed. Trauma centers worried about running out of O-negative, the universal donor type that keeps emergency rooms functioning. Even now, weeks later, blood banks are still pleading for donors to come forward and help rebuild reserves. In New York City, the death toll has climbed to 16 as of February 2nd. Mayor Zoran Mamdani held multiple press briefings updating the public on the grim numbers. Preliminary findings indicate that 13 of the 16 deaths were tied to hypothermia. Most of the victims were found outside, many of them homeless or unsheltered individuals who had nowhere to go when the temperature dropped. And the city expanded its homeless outreach teams, activated code blue protocols, and opened new low-barrier shelters. But despite those efforts, people still died on the streets. Advocates for the homeless say it reveals a deeper failure in the city's safety net, a system that only activates in emergencies but does not address the chronic lack of affordable housing. Here is the important part. Tennessee, a state that rarely sees prolonged ice storms of this magnitude, has extended its statewide emergency order. The Tennessee Department of Health has confirmed 25 weather-related deaths, with 6 fatalities in Shelby County alone. Thousands of residents remain without power. Utility crews from neighboring states have driven hundreds of miles to assist with restoration efforts. But the sheer scale of the damage means some families will spend another week or more in the cold. Mississippi reported 23 deaths. DHS Secretary Kristi Noem personally traveled to the state to coordinate federal response efforts. The Federal Emergency Management Agency approved emergency declarations for 12 states, fast-tracking public assistance funding to reimburse local governments for emergency protective measures. FEMA director emphasized that reform protocols were cutting red tape and delivering aid faster than in previous disasters. But on the ground, many residents say the help is not arriving fast enough. In North Carolina, the storm brought snowfall totals that shattered records. Faust recorded 22.5 inches. Lexington saw 16 inches. Jacksonville got 12. For a state where even 6 inches is considered extreme, these numbers were apocalyptic. Roads became impassable. Emergency vehicles could not reach people in distress. 2 deaths were confirmed as a direct result of the storm in North Carolina. and officials warn that number could rise as more rural areas are reached. Pennsylvania reported 3 deaths. Massachusetts lost 1. Across the South and Southeast, states that rarely invest in heavy-duty snowplows or extensive stockpiles of road salt found themselves paralyzed. Emergency managers from states like Georgia, Alabama, and Louisiana scrambled to coordinate responses with limited resources. Travel bans were enacted. The National Guard was deployed in several locations. And still, people died. Utility companies pre-positioned thousands of line crews ahead of the storm, but even that preparation was not enough. The damage was too widespread. Crews worked 16-hour shifts in dangerous conditions, replacing downed lines, repairing transformers, and climbing ice-coated poles in sub-zero wind chills. As of tonight, nearly 300,000 customers are still waiting. They are waiting for 2 things that still have not fully returned: heat and certainty. Airlines issued flexible rebooking policies, waiving change fees for passengers stranded by cancellations. But that did little to ease the frustration of tens of thousands of travelers stuck in airports or unable to reach family members. Major hubs like Dallas-Fort Worth, Atlanta, and Chicago became bottlenecks. Even days after the storm passed, the ripple effects continued, with crews and aircraft out of position and schedules still scrambling to recover. And now meteorologists are tracking the next system. Another winter storm is approaching the East Coast. Forecasts suggest the potential for heavy snow or a dangerous rain and snow mixture across the Atlantic seaboard. States that are still cleaning up from Fern now face the prospect of round 2. When you step back from the day-to-day updates and look at what Winter Storm Fern revealed, 3 major vulnerabilities emerge. First, the power grid. Second, transportation choke points. Third, critical supply chains like blood and medical resources. The aging power grid in the South is simply not built for prolonged ice storms. Trees grow close to power lines in states where winter weather is rare. When ice accumulates, branches snap, lines go down, when entire counties lose electricity. In the Northeast, infrastructure is designed for snow. Crews know how to respond. Equipment is staged in advance. But in Tennessee, Mississippi, and Alabama, a major ice storm every few years is enough to expose how fragile the system really is. Utility executives are now calling for billions of dollars in grid-hardening investments. Burying lines underground, trimming tree canopies more aggressively, and upgrading equipment to handle extreme weather. Transportation infrastructure also failed under the pressure. Interstates in multiple states became parking lots. Plows could not keep up. Salt supplies ran low. Airports, especially major hubs, revealed how vulnerable the entire national aviation network is to regional weather events. When Atlanta shuts down, the entire country feels the ripple. Non-air airlines are now reviewing hub strategies and asking whether the model of funneling millions of passengers through a handful of mega airports is sustainable in an era of increasingly volatile weather. The blood supply crisis demonstrated just how quickly critical medical resources can evaporate. A few hundred canceled donation events spread across a week, and suddenly hospitals are rationing. The system has no buffer. The American Red Cross estimates it will take weeks to fully rebuild reserves. That leaves hospitals vulnerable if another emergency strikes before supplies recover. There is also a deeper climate signal. A warmer atmosphere can hold more moisture. That means when cold air and storm systems do line up, the result can be heavier snow, more intense ice storms, and larger swings between unseasonable warmth and dangerous Arctic outbreaks. Scientists have been warning for years that climate change does not just mean hotter summers, it also means more extreme and unpredictable winter weather. Winter Storm Fern is a case study in that reality. Record snowfall in North Carolina, record cold in Florida, ice storms in states that thought they were too far south to worry, and a death toll that climbs higher every day. Emergency shelters, too, were stretched thin. The Red Cross and local governments did heroic work opening hundreds of facilities on short notice. But the sheer number of people who needed help overwhelmed capacity in many areas. Volunteers worked around the clock. Supplies ran low. And as the storm dragged on, shelter fatigue set in. As people who had been displaced for days began to wonder when they could go home, and whether home would still have heat when they got there. The question now is not only how to rebuild, but how to make sure the next winter storm Fern does not push the same systems even closer to the breaking point. Infrastructure investments take years. Policy changes take political will. And the next storm is already on the maps. Tonight, Winter Storm Fern is fading from the maps, and the next winter system is still approaching. The official death toll stands at 153. Nearly 300,000 people remain without power. Emergency shelters are still operational in multiple states. Blood banks are still pleading for donors. And millions of Americans are looking at weather forecasts with a sense of dread they did not feel before this winter began. But for millions of people, this winter will be remembered not by storm names, but by nights spent in cold houses, by long lines at shelters, and by the quiet fear of wondering what happens if the lights go out again. It will also be remembered for resilience, for neighbors who ran extension cords to each other's homes so elderly residents could power space heaters, for volunteers who drove hundreds of miles to staff Red Cross shelters, serving meals and handing out blankets to strangers, for utility line crews who worked through the night in dangerous conditions, risking their own safety to restore power, for hospital staff who stretched dwindling blood supplies and found creative ways to keep patients safe. Every 153 lives were lost. Each one of them had a name, a family, a story. The three brothers in Texas who went out to play on a frozen pond. The homeless man found on a New York City sidewalk. The elderly woman in Tennessee who died waiting for power to be restored. They are not just numbers. They are the human cost of a system that was not ready. We will keep tracking both the science and the human stories as this historic winter continues to unfold. If you found this update useful, consider sharing it, subscribing, and letting us know how these storms are affecting you and your family. And as always, stay safe, stay informed, and stay prepared. How do you think your community should change after what this winter has revealed?